Welcome to the Random Bytes podcast, available on Spreaker.com, iTunes, Google Play, and just added to iHeartRadio. A new podcast every day featuring interviews and a unique take on the world we live in. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Random Bytes. Here is your host, Alan Wayne. Welcome back to the Random Internet Radio Show. Tonight we are discussing conspiracies, and the folks in the chat room have some requests that they have made. So I will be playing that after this portion of the show, where I will be mentioning the recent death of Chester Bennington and how it could be a conspiracy. This is from yournewswire.com. Police: Chester Bennington was murdered. This was written by Baxter Dimitri, obviously a pen name. Police have reportedly launched a murder investigation into Chester Bennington's death, with insiders believing it is, quote, extremely likely the Linkin Park frontman was killed in eerily similar circumstances to his close friend Chris Cornell. Foul play suspected. Detectives are looking into whether Chester Bennington was murdered, with the death scene later arranged to resemble a suicide. Very similar to what we heard about Chris Cornell in the last segment. They have put a team of investigators in place and are refusing to rule out a criminal homicide charge. Well, here we go. Quote, murders are sometimes made to look like suicides. Well, no kidding, that's what we've been talking about the whole evening. We think he was murdered. We just have to find out who was behind it. Quote, end quote, said a police source. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the 41-year-old nu metal icon was found dead, but refused to provide details. Well, obviously, I mean, it was too fresh, but, it's one of those things where you gotta think, yeah, it is a little interesting that they refuse to really dig into that. With the agency's chief of operations, Brian Elias, remaining tight-lipped about whether media reports of suicide are accurate. Quote, we are investigating all angles, he said. Suspicious circumstances confirmed. Bennington, who sang at Chris Cornell's recent funeral, by the way, if you haven't looked that up, it is pretty haunting to hear Chester Bennington sing Hallelujah. Very haunting, all things considered. After becoming close to the Soundgarden frontman in recent years, was reportedly working with Cornell's foundation to prevent the sexual exploitation of vulnerable children. The Linkin Park frontman, who is father of 6 children of his own, and was also the godfather to Chris Cornell's son, was on record talking about the long-term emotional fallout of being sexually abused by an older male as a child. This is where it gets rather interesting and juicy, where we talk about the conspiracies of both of these deaths and how they may be connected. Quote, if you think back to when I was really young, or if I think back to when I was really young, this is Chester speaking, to when I was being molested, to when all these horrible things were going on around me, I shuddered, he told the metal magazine Kerrang! In 2011. Now, investigators believe that the deaths of Cornell and Bennington, who died on Cornell's birthday, may be linked. The parallels between the two deaths are astonishing. The close friends who were working on exposing notorious entertainment industry pedophiles died in the same way, with Bennington's death taking place on what would have been Cornell's 53rd birthday. History repeats, same old dirty tricks. Close friends of Cornell say that he was shown a, quote, black book that included the name of one of his professional associates. After setting up his foundation and investigating further, Cornell was close to exposing a network of pedophiles working within the entertainment industry, a dangerous job that he considered his, quote, duty. But his friends believe he was taken out before he finished the job. The official investigation into Chris Cornell's death is closed, but his widow and many of his fans are unsatisfied with the ruling by police and medical examiners that the Soundgarden frontman committed suicide. Now, contrary to the Metal Den, which wrote that Vicky was responsible for Chris Cornell's death, there's no such insinuation here. Detroit police wrapped up their investigations quickly, and the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office ruled the death a suicide, but investigators are claiming that unexplained gaps in the official timeline of Cornell's final moments and suspicious inconsistencies in the records suggest that Cornell's death was not suicide at all, but a premeditated homicide and cover-up. As we had discussed previously, the suspicious circumstances behind Chris Cornell's death, the flying of a security guard, basically, out to a lush, all-expenses-paid vacation out of the country. Various different things. Investigator Randy Cody is among those questioning the suicide ruling. He points to perceived timeline gaps, forensic questions, and what he says are two signs that Cornell had a head wound that was not mentioned in autopsy reports. Now, there was blood in the bathroom at the time. Not very many people remember that, but there were news reports that there was blood in the bathroom at the time of Cornell's death. Why would somebody have blood during an asphyxiation? Well, could be a gruesome side effect of the whole thing, but it is very odd. Speaking to Detroit Free Press, he referenced police scanner audio, Detroit police scanner audio, in which a medic is heard saying, quote, patient did have an exercise rubber band around his neck, suggestions of possible strangulation, trauma to the back of the head, history of depression. Patient is cool to the touch in all areas at this time. Now, there are several ways that could have happened. If there's trauma to the back of the head, then it could have been a violent reaction to the suicide. We don't know what happened in that hotel room. But in order to crack your head open to draw blood, that takes quite a blow. Just saying. Darren writes, blood from shooting up, perhaps. Not that amount of blood, bro. When you shoot up, blood is not... It doesn't come gushing out of you. Unless you're a complete noob and you don't know what you're doing. Unless you hit a vein the wrong way, and then you have problems. But knowing Chris Cornell's history, he wasn't a noob. He'd know what he was doing. Cody also questions whether medics really broke so many of Cornell's ribs in efforts to resuscitate him. Quote, you mean these medics did 9 rib fractures during CPR? Well, that can happen. That can happen. But he says he's not buying it. Cody also believes Cornell was killed because he was about to expose a child sex ring. Unanswered questions. In May, Chester Bennington tweeted, quote, as of today, my life's purpose is one of love and understanding. The world needs to change, and that change comes from within. Hate, pride, vengeance, and fear are the plague of the earth. Love, kindness, compassion, empathy, and service to others are the cure. End quote. He added a challenge to all his followers on Twitter. Quote, let's all choose to be part of the cure. If we look outside ourselves to find love and peace, we will ultimately fail. It has to come from within. Lead by example. Close quote. Chester Bennington was a mature, well-adjusted man who had exorcised his demons and had dedicated his life to fighting for others, including his 6 children and his godson, Christopher Cornell, and exposing the pedophile ring in entertainment industry. However, evil forces seem determined to shut these kind of people down. As details of his death emerge, it is worth keeping an eye on who pushes hardest with the suicide angle and attempts to shut down anyone who raises questions. They may be involved in the cover-up. So, let's take a look at what we know. Okay. We know that Chris Cornell had established a foundation to help abused children. We know that Chester Bennington was Chris Cornell's godson. No. Sorry. Chester Bennington was the godfather to Chris Cornell's child. Now, being that Chris Cornell had established this foundation, apparently had access to a black book of high-ranking entertainment officials and their involvement in pedophilia. And Chester Bennington, being the godfather to his child, you must think that Chris Cornell had a certain level of trust for Chester Bennington. You also have to think that Chris Cornell, considering he knew about everybody knew about Chester Bennington's abuse, why was he placed in that particular position? Because those two could work together to expose a dastardly ring of pedophilia in the entertainment industry. Now, it is interesting to think that there might be this massive cover-up going on with numerous entertainment officials involved, trying to cover their own asses. Now with Chester out of the picture, who else is going to take up that mantle? If Chris was the leader in getting this information out to the public and seeing these people brought to justice, and Chester was an associate, who else is out there that knows about this? And who else is out there that is going to stick their neck out for this cause now? You know, it does kind of ring kind of nasty when you think about it. It is kind of, it does ring kind of, it is a possibility. Because these people have more money than God. These people are very well connected. These people are, I mean, just think of at the top of their game. Just think of the people who are pulling the strings, the puppet masters, as it were. Just think about that. And think about the power that these people yield. If a simple human being with $10,000 can put out a completely anonymous hit on the dark web, utilizing Bitcoin, then what is to say that these people with more power and more influence could not do a more crack-up job? Who's to say? Who's to say that these people were not implicitly involved in the deaths of both Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington, just to save their own skins from their disgusting pedophilic habits? There's a part of me that does not want to believe that. There's a part of me that, in some sick way, wants to believe, would rather believe that these men committed suicide because of depression, or because of drugs, or because of some kind of glitch in their system. And yet, doesn't it make sense? Don't all three of these scenarios make sense, that these people could possibly be murdered and not have committed suicide? If so, man, it just goes to show that only certain people are above the law. And these certain people will kill you without a second thought. And that is probably the most frightening takeaway of all of this. If people like Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and Kurt Cobain can be murdered for reasons such as money or cover-up, man. And there's hundreds of these conspiracy theories. There's hundreds of these conspiracy theories. I mean, they're all over the place. And imagine, if you will, if these conspiracy theories actually hold water and are actually true. It's disturbing. What do you guys think? Do you think that Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington committed suicide, or do you think that they were merely victims hoping to do the right thing, hoping to expose entertainment officials, huge, powerful men who utilize their power to engage in sick and twisted fantasies involving children? I'm kind of on the fence. In a sick way, as I said before, I want it to be suicide. In a sick way. Because it just scares me to death to think that there would be possibly this thing that, I mean, that anybody can get you at any time. It's amazing. But guess we'll find out. I mean, will we ever find out? It's 23 years later. Courtney Love still walks free. If she were ever to be convicted, it would be, the statute of limitations on murder there is none. But it just appears that people are willing to accept the fact, or at least they think the fact, that Kurt Cobain had committed suicide. They are comfortable with that. You know, I recall that there was a psychic medium once on the radio, and he was asked to contact Kurt Cobain, or Kurt Cobain came through during a session, and confirmed that Courtney Love had killed him, that he did not want to die, that he missed his daughter. And I know there are those of you out there who believe in the paranormal and believe that this happened, that those things can happen. Wherever you are, Chester and Chris, still tragic. Doesn't matter what the circumstances of the death are, still tragic, but even more so tragic if you were taken out for protecting children. What do you guys think? The RIR Show at gmail.com, at RIR Show, or at RIR Show on Twitter, and of course leave your comments wherever you hear this broadcast. Up next, we're going to play some Linkin Park. These are two of my favorite songs, and then we're going to play some requests from the chat here on the Random Internet Radio Show. Also, in another creepy twist, Chester Bennington dedicated this album to his friend Chris Cornell. Those two were tight, guys. Those two were tight. And Was it a matter of he missed his friend? Was it a matter that he was so depressed by his friend leaving the earth that it was just too much for him to bear?